So, focusing on the Acolyte series, this is the very first Star Wars project, whatever you want to call it, Star Wars series in this scenario, that has received ratios across the board. We never saw this with the Kenobi series, we never saw this with The Mandalorian, Ahsoka Tano, or even, of course, the other Star Wars shows like the Book of Boba Fett. Never has a Star Wars project been ratioed across the board on social media. And I think that's a real telltale sign of how the fact that the fans are now finally standing up and voicing their opinions and how they have been feeling for the past number of years about Kathleen Kennedy's lack of leadership over at Lucasfilm. This is Mike Zero. Subscribe if you're new and like this video to see future updates. You can also follow me at Mike01. I thank you also very much for the great and kind support. So, Leslye Headland, I think, is the main reason why so many people are beginning to despise the Acolyte before it even has dropped on Disney+, which, by the way, it is releasing on June 6th, alright, June 4th, I should say, actually, before they get rolling with the marketing campaign on the 6th to promote the other episodes. There's a lot of things going on with this when it comes to Kathleen Kennedy and her overall stand against the fandom, against George Lucas's Star Wars, you know, the original 6 movies, you got the original trilogy, and you got the prequels. George has made this openly clear a couple of years ago on social media that the philosophy that remains intact within Star Wars are within those 6 movies. That's what he said, and Disney's going on a different path. Now, moving onwards, alright, what's interesting about all this further has a lot to do with Kathleen Kennedy's overall input on the Acolyte trailer disaster and how everyone has been really just voicing their opinion on this show well before its release. Now, with Lucasfilm now listed as one of the most failed divisions at the Walt Disney Company, one major development has to do with Kathleen Kennedy heading into damage control for the Acolyte series after, of course, the ongoing backlash from fans that grew up with the originals and prequels. Now, Kennedy went on to deliver the following. What I find to be so incredible about the Acolyte, besides the fact that we have a wonderful, diverse cast, is our showrunner, Leslye Headland, who we made sure to really put diversity, equity, and inclusion at the forefront of this series. Now, that was the goal we really wanted to reach with the series, and previously we had never reached such a height of honoring that before. I would be lying if we hadn't heard any level of noise about the changes that we are bringing to the Star Wars world, and all I can say to that is, these are nothing more than a minority of fans that I think are too attached to the burden of George Lucas's vision and his philosophy of Star Wars. We decided we had to detach from that to embrace something truly new that could gravitate toward new fans, a series focusing on a new era. Anyone claiming that our upcoming Acolyte series is agenda-driven or holds some form of an ideology to remove a certain demographic is just completely misleading and outright terrible behavior and should not be welcome within such a large fandom like Star Wars. What we have accomplished here with this series is honoring women and their roles in the industry and how we are taking elements of what fans like to call Star Wars Legends or the expanded universe and how we found impressive ways to sort of mix that in with Leslie's way of storytelling. In fact, this was her idea to cherry pick from the Legends tales, and how we could canonize off of that. It truly was a remarkable tool that I think we needed in the end. What made this production the smoothest one of all, I think, had to do with our ultimate decision to keeping Mr. Lucas away from the sets and the production of this series, so that he didn't have much influence from his philosophy or view of Star Wars, and that was our leap to success. We are proud of the first footage that we put out to the public, and we find nothing wrong with the fan reception. We have gotten the best response to a Star Wars project since years. I think even more so than when we debuted our trailer for Ahsoka with Dave Filoni last year. So it truly is inspiring that we are making so many changes to this ever-evolving galaxy far, far away, and it really is going to hit home in the hearts of fans. We here at Lucasfilm find it to be very offensive when some members of this community attempt to convince others to alter their perception of what Star Wars is all about. Now guys, let me pause here quick before I move on. Now, the thing about Kathleen Kennedy is that she is labeling the usage of the expanded universe, or Legends, whatever you guys would like to label it as a tool as a great tool, as she would say, to use to basically copy and paste it into Leslye Headland's Star Wars and to give her own odd version of it all. We already know that Leslye Headland was very clear about this, that she's going to basically be stealing and ripping off of the expanded universe stories and throwing that into the Acolyte. Alright, now, the thing about the Acolyte is that we already know that this series is going to be an abomination. It's not just about the dislikes, it's not just about the ratios across the board, it's also not just about the fact that it's an all-female-led TV series, which, look, by the way, that's fine if you want to do that in isolation, if it doesn't hold any form of an agenda, if it comes naturally throughout the process, but in this scenario, given that it's Leslye Headland, given that it's Kathleen Kennedy, and Lucasfilm's track record has been absolutely terrible the past number of years, I would even argue since 2012, it really has no value right from the get-go, alright? So, moving onwards, on top of that, she goes on to conclude, our stories have nothing to do with any sort of agenda or ideology, and Leslye is just telling her vision of what Star Wars stands for as an artist and as a creator, and I think that's what really needs to be respected by everyone. Whether you are new to this franchise or have been loyal to it over the decades, I think it's crucial to let the product speak for itself. Once we, of course, debut it this June on Disney+. We really wanted to find a way to interconnect the Acolyte to some of our upcoming slate of Star Wars films. That's why this story is going to be so powerful and important to our updated pipeline of Star Wars projects that are now in development. So that, I think, is even more damaging, the fact that they want to make the Acolyte the center of the upcoming Star Wars film slate and how it's going to interconnect with all of those. Now, no doubt about it, is this going to connect to the upcoming James Mangold Star Wars film, which, by the way, focuses on the birth of the Force and the birth of the First Jedi Order and everything related to it in that sense, which, by the way, comes well before the High Republic. There's no doubt about it as well that this series is going to somewhat connect to the prequel trilogy, and Leslye was also clear about that this is going to alter your perception of George Lucas's Star Wars films. And I think that what she's talking about, obviously, are the prequels. She's not really catering toward the originals. They're nowhere near close to the High Republic, where in this sense, The Phantom Menace is at least, 100 or so years after. Now, that's exactly why the High Republic is being associated with the Acolyte. They want to make the Acolyte basically a prequel to Episode 1. If you even want to call it a prequel, since it's like 100 years before, it's practically an entirely new story. But what's interesting about this, again, is the fact that Kathleen Kennedy is so bent on the fact that you had to shift away from George's vision, you had to shift away from his philosophy, you had to ban him from the sets, and to not allow him to visit the production, to remain focused on your ideology and on all the DEI nonsense that Kathleen Kennedy is really just openly admitting that is not what this show is all about, that it has nothing to do with any sort of agenda. And might I add, she's beginning to sound like Bob Iger at this point. But anyway, guys, drop a comment below, fill me in below in the comments what you all have to say about this, and if you guys did enjoy the content for today, make sure to drop a thumbs up on this video to support the channel, and I will catch you guys later.